She stepped over my shoe like I was a forgotten suitcase, not even a glance, just the rustle of her dress and the trail of her perfume, something French, expensive and cold. I'd bought it for our anniversary. She used it tonight. "You'll be in the third row," she said, flicking through her phone. "Staff and VIPs up front. Third row, right, that's where the husbands go. The ones who paid for the gown, the MBA, the designer business cards that still carry our last name because hers, she once said, sounded too local. But at least I got a row, a seat, a place to watch my investment speak for itself." I nodded, straightened my tie. She was gone before I finished the gesture. Our hotel suite still smelled faintly of dry cleaning and foundation powder. She'd commandeered both bathrooms, one for hair, one for peace. I dressed alone by the window, watching delivery trucks crawl past streetlights. There was a file folder on the desk, plain manila, unmarked. She had noticed it. She never noticed the things that didn't scream her name. Inside that folder was enough to undo 10 years of shared ambition, but it wouldn't scream either. It would hum, patiently, like an engine warming up in the dark. I wasn't angry. Not then. That would have made her too important. No, what I felt was something slower, something that started months ago, maybe longer. The first time she told someone, "Oh, I run the whole thing by myself." The way she corrected people when they called me her co-founder. "No, Daniel handles paperwork." Paperwork, yeah. Like the term sheets, the shell company setup, the asset protection strategies, the anonymous fund that turned out to be our biggest client. All that paperwork she never read. Why would she? She had more important things to focus on, like photo angles and which champagne to serve on the yacht we only chartered once and then kept posting about for months, as if it were still docked somewhere waiting for her to return. She didn't see me as a partner anymore. I was infrastructure, like Wi-Fi or a light switch. And I suppose that's on me. I let her build the myth while I managed the math. I stayed behind the camera. I booked the flights. I checked her speeches for legal landmines. I got used to people smiling past me. But something shifted last fall. Not a fight, not an affair, though I wouldn't be surprised if there were one buried somewhere under that smug new assistant of hers with the Rolex and no job title. No, what shifted was smaller than all that. We were at a dinner, one of those endless fundraisers. She laughed too loudly at someone else's joke and turned to me and said, "Don't wait up tonight." That's it, 5 words. But the way she said them made it clear I'd become optional. I didn't confront her. I took out a notepad instead, started writing down everything she no longer said out loud. Who she thanked, who she deferred to, whose name showed up in her calendar more than mine. Patterns, habits, slips. I saw it coming, in other words. Which is why, tonight, as she spiraled through the suite in a rush of sequins and borrowed sincerity, I said nothing. I didn't mention the folder, didn't mention that the client she was about to thank on stage had already pulled funding 3 days ago, or that the strategic pivot she thought was a bold new move was actually the legal separation of our financial footprints, finalized 2 weeks ago, or that the sponsor behind her meteoric rise was already off the cap table by my hand. I said none of that. I just nodded, because sometimes silence is heavier than a shout. And if you've read this far, if this quiet moment feels familiar, then maybe hit that subscribe button. I know over 97% of you haven't, but it helps our team bring you these stories the way they were meant to be told, without noise, without fluff, just truth. She walked out the door with a final "don't be late," as if I was her intern. I waited 15 seconds, then picked up the folder and left behind nothing but the echo of my footsteps and the hotel keycard she wouldn't notice missing until much later. By then, the ceremony would have already started, the cameras would be on, and she would step onto the stage thinking the night was hers. She was half right. The ballroom dimmed like the beginning of a play, except I already knew the ending. I could practically hear the internal monologue she'd practiced in the mirror. My name wouldn't be in it. The question was just how far she'd go to pretend I didn't exist. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host boomed, "this year's Visionary Founder Award goes to..." A beat. "Celeste Noring." Thunderous applause. Spotlights flared. She floated to the stage, all polish and poise, wearing a sapphire gown I'd paid for on a corporate card. Our corporate card, back when we still said "our." She paused for effect. She'd always known how to work a crowd. Her voice came soft, deliberate. "Thank you. Thank you all. This is surreal. A decade ago, I was selling design mock-ups out of a shared workspace and dreaming of building something that mattered. Pause, smile, look left, then right. I knew the beats by heart. This award isn't about me. It's about the people who believed when it was just a Dropbox folder and a dream. It's about trust, partnership, loyalty. She turned, eyes shining, lips trembling with just enough of a quiver to seem authentic. And I want to thank my real partner. You know who you are. The audience laughed. Warmly, some clapped harder, thinking it was sweet. Her protege, the shiny-haired junior exec with too much wristwatch and not enough resume, smirked in the front row like he'd just been crowned. My mouth tasted like pennies. Not even a glance my way, not a nod, not a single syllable. I wasn't just invisible. I was deliberately edited out. I stayed seated for one full breath, then another, and then I stood. I didn't rush. I didn't stumble or slam a chair. I just rose, buttoned my jacket, and walked toward the exit under the dull thud of clapping hands. She never saw me leave. Or maybe she did and chose not to react. Either way, the message was received. She'd rewritten the story, and I was no longer in the cast. Halfway to the lobby, I heard her assistant, Sienna, muttering behind me. Wait, where's her phone? She'd left it on their table. Screen up. Rookie mistake. Probably trusted Sienna to guard it like a terrier. Then the buzzing started. At first, just one buzz. Then again, and again. The kind of panic vibration that doesn't stop. The kind that usually precedes a PR disaster or leak. Sienna caught up to me, holding the phone like it was radioactive. Mr. Noring? Daniel, can you just look? Someone needs to tell her. I looked down. The screen was filled with one name, a familiar one. CEO Aurelius Capital. Text after text. Daniel just pulled all sponsor funding? Why didn't you tell me he was your husband? We're yanking everything effective immediately. What did you do? I looked at Sienna, raised one eyebrow. Must be a mix-up. She blinked. Should I? I smiled. She'll figure it out. She always does. The elevator doors opened just in time to frame me in golden silence. I stepped in, pressed L, and watched the numbers tick down. Somewhere up there, she was basking in applause. The cameras were probably catching her best angle. The hashtag Hatch Visionary Queen would be trending by midnight, but under the noise, under the champagne and curated Instagram posts, a fault line had begun to split, and she hadn't even noticed. She thought the betrayal was hers to deliver. She rehearsed it, delivered it with flair. What she didn't realize was that her mic had stayed on a beat too long, and mine had just switched on. Daniel, wait! Her assistant's heels clicked behind me like gunfire on marble. I didn't break stride. She jogged to catch up, breathless, holding the phone out like it was ticking. It's her phone. It won't stop. The CEO's texting. He says it's urgent. I finally stopped, turned. Her screen was lit up with a storm of messages, the kind you don't get unless the money's already moving in the wrong direction. CEO, 9:14 p.m. What the hell is going on? CEO, 9:16 p.m. Your sponsor just walked. CEO, 9:17 p.m. Your husband's company. What did you do? I took the phone in my hand, studied the string of texts, then handed it back with a faint, measured smile. Must be a mistake. I pressed the elevator button. It opened instantly. Beautiful timing, like it had been waiting for me to finish the scene. Behind me, Sienna muttered something into her earpiece. I caught a flicker of panic in her eyes. She was smart enough to know this wasn't just a social faux pas. Something tectonic had shifted beneath their feet. As the elevator doors closed, I caught one last glimpse of the ballroom through the glass. Still glittering, still applauding, still clueless. But upstairs, on the stage, Celeste was beginning to see the cracks. I imagined her wrapping up the speech, floating down from the podium into a circle of congratulations. I imagined Sienna racing to her side, whispering something urgent into her ear, her reaching for her phone, then freezing. No password needed. It was still open to the last message. Your husband's company. 6 words. That's all it took. Not Daniel. Not your ex. Not the guy in row 3. Your husband's company. I could almost hear the click inside her head as the pieces began to fit together. Every investor dinner I skipped every board meeting she thought I wasn't interested in, every clause in the funding agreement she signed but never read, every time I said, let me handle it. And she rolled her eyes like I was just trying to feel useful. She thought she'd elevated past me, evolved, that I was the guy who fixed printers and called the CPA. She never thought to follow the breadcrumbs back to the holding firm that funded her rocket ship, never asked how she landed her biggest client, why the deal had gone through so fast, who Evermere Ventures really was. Now she was standing center stage in a collapsing fantasy, dressed in silk and lit by the spotlight she had begged for, and the rope she thought she was climbing, she was just reaching the end of it. The elevator chimed softly, landing at the lobby. I walked out without hurry, nodding to the doorman who gave me a curious glance, probably assuming I'd forgotten something upstairs. I hadn't. I had everything I needed. Let them celebrate. Let them toast her brilliance and post flattering photos under inspirational captions she didn't write. In about 15 minutes, the whispers would start. 20 more, and someone would post the funding poll on LinkedIn. An hour from now, a journalist would call her COO for comment. And sometime around midnight, she would finally stop texting me, because by then she'd understand something I'd never said out loud. The empire she thought she built, it was rented, and the lease was in my name. 2 months earlier, the boardroom was quiet in that rich, deliberate way. Polished wood, tempered glass, low voices, and the kind of lighting that made everyone look 20% more competent. Daniel sat at the head of the table, tie loosened, but jaw locked in that way that said he wasn't there to discuss options, he was there to execute. She still doesn't know Evermere holds equity in her largest vendor? One of the partners asked, glancing up from a leather folder. Daniel didn't bother looking up. She never asked, and I never offered. A pause. Another partner cleared his throat. Technically, you disclosed that relationship on the vendor filing. It's in the docs. Daniel nodded. Page 48, footnote 3, appendix B. The CFO chuckled. She never read that. She never read any of it, Daniel replied, finally looking up. She was busy rewriting the company story for panels and press blurbs. She thinks I set up the LLC as a tax favor. She thinks the money just appeared. The chairman leaned forward. So what's your ask? Daniel pulled a small envelope from his briefcase and slid it down the table. Inside, a printed motion. Terminate all sponsorship and service contracts involving her firm and its subsidiaries, citing Clause 17C of the MSA, non-disclosure of conflicted interest. Legalese that could sound harsh or harmless depending on how it was framed. But in practice, it was a guillotine. She violated 17C by failing to disclose personal conflict of interest with the holding board of the sponsor. Her protege, the intern turned VP, is on payroll, her payroll. That makes him a secondary related party to a board member, me. Someone let out a low whistle, and she signed the clause. Daniel nodded, initialed it herself. 5 years ago, right under the sentence. Failure to disclose relationships involving financial oversight may result in immediate withdrawal of all support. Another pause. Then the chairman turned to the others. All in favor of executing the clause quietly, without announcement. Hands rose, one by one, unanimous. Daniel watched the last hand go up, then picked up his laptop and opened the draft email. He already had it written. It just needed a date and a send button. I want it clean, he said, fingers poised over the keys. No media leaks, no statements. Just a legal retreat and a wall of silence. The legal counsel nodded. Clause 17C lets us freeze assets for review. No lawsuit risk, no press attention unless she creates it. Daniel hit send. The email whooshed out like a loaded gun firing a silencer round. And that was it. The wire that held her entire operation aloft had just been cut. Not with fury, not with spectacle, with structure. He closed the laptop slowly and leaned back in the chair. We'll give it 2 months. Enough time for her to book that gala, prep her speech, shine the trophy. Then we pull. The CFO grinned. You're cold. No, Daniel said. I'm quiet. On his drive home that night, he passed by one of her billboards. Founder, innovator, visionary. He knew the photographer. Had cut the check himself. He looked up at her pixel-perfect smile and said aloud, to no one, it's not revenge if you gave them every chance to read the fine print. By the time he got home, she was on a Zoom call, laughing with her assistant about the upcoming awards ceremony. Daniel kissed her on the cheek. She barely noticed. Can you forward the RSVP for the sponsors? She said distractedly. Already taken care of, he replied. You won't have to think about it at all. The glitter hadn't even settled on the tablecloths before the first whisper broke through the ambient hum of string quartets and congratulatory buzz. Did you hear? A woman in a velvet blazer leaned over a row of gold chairs, wine glass in hand, voice just high enough to be caught. Her lead sponsor pulled out. Tonight. It was the kind of whisper that sticks, half rumor, half blood in the water. And in a room like this, it multiplied fast. 3 tables down, someone checked their phone. A second later, another guest did, and then another. Meanwhile, Celeste was glowing, or trying to. She drifted through the after-party with a champagne flute she hadn't sipped, her smile frozen in place like it had been retouched. She shook hands, laughed a beat too loud, thanked people she didn't remember meeting. On the outside, it looked flawless. On the inside, she was sweating through silk. Sienna intercepted her midway through a toast, eyes wide, clutching her phone. Celeste, there's a problem. You need to see this. Celeste held her smile for one more clink, then ducked behind a draped column with her assistant. What? Sienna turned the screen. A headline, already live, front page of Venture Pulse. Key financial backer pulls out of award winner's firm, crisis brewing. Below it, a blurry shot of Celeste at the podium. The article cited unnamed internal sources confirming the funding had evaporated hours after the award was announced, suggesting potential breach of fiduciary protocol, hinting at misuse of influence. Words like disclosure failure, conflict of interest, and whistleblower were stacked like dominoes. Celeste's breath hitched. How is this already out? Sienna didn't respond. Delete it, Celeste snapped. I can't. It's Venture Pulse. It's syndicated. People are already sharing it. Scroll. Look at the comments. Celeste did. Knew it was too polished to be clean. Visionary, sure, just not financially. Wait, wasn't her husband involved in that firm? Oh, this is messy. Her hand trembled. She dropped her flute, glass shattering on the ballroom floor. The crash turned heads. She smiled nervously and bent to pick up the stem, pricking her finger. Tiny drop of blood on a white linen napkin. Symbolic. Perfect. She bolted toward the corridor, dialing furiously. Daniel's name on the screen. Ringing. Ringing. Then, voicemail. Daniel, call me. Now. What is this? What the hell are you doing? She tried again. Same result. She switched to text. Please call. This isn't funny. No response. In that moment, the ballroom no longer felt like hers. She felt observed, not admired, watched, cataloged, judged. The applause that had made her feel immortal 20 minutes ago now echoed like footsteps behind her. She scanned the room and saw it differently now. That hedge fund guy who had hugged her too tightly earlier, on his phone, eyes darting toward her, then away. The 2 women from the accelerator program, whispers behind manicured hands. And in the far corner, someone from her own marketing team, staring at her with a look she couldn't quite place. Pity. That was new. She tried another text. Something softer. Let's talk, okay? Just tell me what's happening. Still nothing. She opened her email, 47 unread messages. Subject lines like, urgent, need clarification on sponsor exit, wire transfer delayed, can you confirm? Is Evermere still our lead? One from the COO, did you know Daniel's firm was the fund? This makes us look like amateurs. Celeste backed into the hallway, heart pounding in her ears, the glittering chaos of the ballroom behind her now spinning like a roulette wheel. She leaned against the wall, shoes suddenly tight, breath shallow. Her crown was slipping, and she could feel it. She looked down at her phone again. Nothing from Daniel, just the cold light of a headline she didn't control, and a text thread that screamed silence louder than any scandal. Her story wasn't trending anymore. It was unraveling. The boardroom smelled like panic masked with citrus-scented disinfectant and stale coffee. It was 8:12 a.m. and not a single person had touched the catered breakfast. Silver trays of untouched croissants steaming beside untouched lattes. Celeste sat at the head of the table in yesterday's heels and a blazer borrowed from her assistant because she'd spilled coffee on hers in the lobby on the way in, a fitting metaphor for the last 12 hours. The CFO stood by the monitor, flipping through slides he clearly hadn't planned to show. They pulled 5 accounts, he said flatly. Overnight. Celeste blinked. No, what? Evermere? Strap front? Ledger path? Link 11. Develops, he said, ticking off. Every account linked to our Q4 operating margin. Link 11 was under a multi-year revoked. Her stomach dropped. She reached for the water glass, hands shaking so slightly she hoped no one noticed. Legal counsel stepped in, flipping open a worn binder, tabs protruding like blades. We reviewed every line of the MSA and attached clauses. Your breach was clear, clause 14. She didn't even look up as she read it. Failure to disclose conflicts of interest, specifically financial or intimate, involving senior staff or advisors and individuals attached to funding entities or clients. Are you serious? Celeste snapped. It's my husband. That doesn't count. Now the legal advisor looked up, slowly. It does when your husband is a board member of the holding firm backing half your funding streams, and when you hired a protege who lives with you to oversee accounts directly involving those funders. I don't live with him. You listed him as a cohabitant on last year's insurance form. We checked. Celeste's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The CFO turned the screen to show an internal flowchart. Celeste's firm in the middle, a ring of vendors and sponsors around it, all linked, all pulling away like a controlled detonation. This isn't a misunderstanding, he said, that this is a full exit. But Daniel can't just... The board chair, an older woman who'd been quiet until now, raised one hand. Her voice was calm, final. He didn't. Celeste turned to her, confused. The chair folded her hands. He didn't pull out. His company did. Celeste's mouth went dry. The phrasing hadn't just changed, the roles had. You keep saying husband like it's a shield, the chair continued. But on paper, you're not married to Daniel Noring, strategic advisor. You're entangled with Evermere's legal officer and controlling partner, a person whose signature is on every vendor agreement you blindly ratified over 5 years. Celeste tried to breathe. He never said, "Did you ask?" That shut her up. Her eyes bounced from face to face. Nobody would meet her gaze anymore. Not directly. The room had turned. She was no longer the headline founder, no longer the star client. She was now a risk, a PR liability in heels. The COO entered late, breathing hard, waving his phone. Press just got wind of the clause. Someone leaked the 14 violation. It's spreading. Reddit, X, LinkedIn. They're calling it the silent divorce. The boardroom shifted. Phones lit up. Texts buzzed. Someone in finance cursed under their breath. Another grabbed their laptop and started typing furiously. Celeste stared at the water glass again. He did this to humiliate me, she whispered. No, the chair said. He did it to leave. And he had. Cleanly, legally. Without drama. Without confrontation. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't filed a complaint. He'd just, stepped out of the room and taken the floor with him. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about control. And she'd lost all of it. The email came in just before lunch. Subject line, urgent. Account activity suspended. Immediate review required. Celeste didn't open it right away. She was too busy dialing the COO and screaming into his voicemail. Something about optics, about narrative control, about fixing the tone in the press before it calcified into truth. It wasn't until her assistant stormed in, pale as salt, that she finally looked. Bank notice. Operating account frozen. Reason. Irregularities and sponsor-linked disclosures pending compliance verification. Translation. You're radioactive. She clicked to her dashboard. Nothing loaded. She tried to process payroll next. Error, account inaccessible. Vendor portal? Payment failed. The catering deposit for the upcoming investor brunch? Gone. Bounced. Jesus Christ, she whispered. Her reflection in the monitor looked unfamiliar. Creased forehead, bloodshot eyes, panic slowly fermenting into desperation. She called HR. Has payroll run? She asked, trying to sound firm. A long pause. No, Celeste, we can't process it. It's locked. People are already messaging me. I've got a line outside the HR door and 2 department heads threatening to walk. She hung up. The COO texted next. We just lost Slack access. Corporate card declined. Your Uber account is suspended. Another ding. Marketing. Canceled the podcast taping. Sponsors ghosted. Another. Legal. Received notice of vendor claim holds. One's threatening breach action. She tried to steady her breath, picked up her phone and scrolled through contacts until she reached Tanner Maddox, an old flame turned venture capitalist, someone who always liked being her white knight when cameras were nearby. She hit call. "Tanner, I need a favor," she said quickly, skipping past pleasantries. "Bridge loan, temporary, just a couple $100K until we—" "You need to stop right there," he said, no humor in his voice. She blinked. "What?" "I already got the call," he said. "Daniel reached out 2 weeks ago, told me this might happen. He said you'd probably frame it as short-term cash flow. He also sent me the MSA clause you breached." Celeste's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Look," he said, softening slightly, "you're talented, but I'm not stepping into this minefield. If Evermere froze your ops and pulled their network, you're not short on cash. You're out of lifelines." She could hear her own pulse thudding in her ears. "Tanner," she whispered, "please, I made one mistake." "No," he replied, "you made one enemy, and he was the quiet kind." He hung up. Celeste stood there for several seconds, just stood. Then slowly, deliberately, she threw her phone, not onto the couch, not at a pillow. She hurled it across the room, watched it crack against the concrete floor. The screen didn't just shatter, it buckled, like it had been punched from the inside. The silence afterwards was louder than the impact. She was alone in her own office. The space Daniel had helped lease, the one he'd designed to feel like a launch pad, not a throne. Now it felt like a bunker with no exit. The salt in the wound wasn't just the funding cuts. It was how Daniel had sealed every escape route. Evermere's retreat triggered alerts across every investor tied to their network, every angel, every institutional fund, even the boutique firms. He hadn't just pulled the plug, he'd walked through the garden after and salted the earth. And he hadn't done it out of rage, he'd done it out of calculation. She was the only one panicking. He was probably somewhere very, very quiet. And she knew now that silence was the loudest threat of all. She chartered a jet, not commercial, private. She paid out of pocket because the company card was now a brick in her wallet. The jet smelled like leather and desperation, and during the 2-hour flight she rewrote the same text to Daniel 27 times. None of them were sent. Each one felt either too angry or too pathetic, mostly both. By the time she landed, her makeup was a faded outline of what it had been on awards night, and her phone battery was at 4%. No new messages, no missed calls, just that one final voicemail from him left weeks ago that she'd never bothered to listen to. She listened to it now. "Hope your speech goes well. You always nail the room." Click. No bitterness, no sarcasm, just calm, unbearably calm. She stepped into their house, no, his house, if she was being honest. He'd bought it, furnished it, designed the kitchen for her even though she never cooked. The air was still, but wrong, like walking into a memory that already knew it was fading. Everything was tidy, too tidy, the kind of clean that means no one lives there anymore. Shoes gone, jackets gone. The whiskey decanter he always left 1/3 full, empty, cleaned, put away. No toothbrush, no razor, no keys on the hook, just the faint outline of where his laptop charger had dented the leather desk mat. "Daniel?" she called out, not expecting an answer. She didn't get one, but there was something on the kitchen island, a manila envelope. Her breath caught, not because it was ominous, because it was so quiet. It didn't scream, it didn't accuse, it just waited. She opened it slowly. Inside, divorce paperwork, neatly filled, signed, notarized, no legal traps, no inflated demands. Just fair splits, fairer than she deserved, frankly. There was also a one-page spreadsheet, Daniel style, minimal font, clean columns. Accounts retained by Celeste Noring, listed, personal checking, legacy family trust, untouched. Half the Evermere stock, frozen but still hers. Vehicle, art, then a yellow post-it, his handwriting. Small. Your stage, your spotlight, your partner. No name, no sign-off. Just that. She stared at the note until the lines of the letters blurred. It hit her in waves. This wasn't punishment, not really. He hadn't raged, hadn't exposed her on social media, hadn't leaked anything that would make him look like a man scorned. He'd simply ended it surgically, and he'd left her everything she said she wanted: control, image, her own name in the headlines. He hadn't left a single door open for a fight, which meant there was nothing to win, no moment of reconciliation to plan, no clever apology to deliver in a dramatic airport scene. He'd already boarded the metaphorical plane, probably weeks ago. The house creaked as the HVAC kicked in. The silence wrapped around her shoulders like ice. She dropped to the floor, back against the kitchen cabinet, manila envelope in her lap. She didn't cry, not at first. She just breathed long and slow, like her body was trying to figure out if it was still allowed to. Then finally her phone buzzed. A breaking news alert. Evermere confirms silent exit from Noring Ventures. No comment from Founding Family. Founding Family. She read that phrase over and over again. There was no more family, just a founder, sitting alone in a designer kitchen, holding a letter that said everything he never needed to yell. It broke mid-morning on a Tuesday, 2 weeks after the envelope. She was sitting in a borrowed office, one of those shared spaces startups use when they're too broke for glass walls, but too proud for a garage. Her assistant, new one, unpaid intern actually, burst in, phone in hand. Bloomberg picked it up. Celeste didn't look up. What? The acquisition. That got her attention. She grabbed the phone, scrolled. There it was, top of the feed, the final nail. Noring Ventures acquired by Graybridge Strategic Group for undisclosed but laughably low sum. She clicked through. Industry analysts speculated the sale price was closer to liquidation than valuation. One quote stood out like a scalpel. Once a rising star in femtech funding, Noring Ventures' collapse has become a case study in silent consolidation and conflict entanglement. She didn't need a translator. The phrase conflict entanglement was code for you blew up your own credibility and dragged others with you. She kept reading. Graybridge wasn't Daniel's firm, but she recognized two of their board members, former partners at Evermere. The DNA was unmistakable. They hadn't bought her out, they'd put her down. In the cruelest irony, her own cap table had cannibalized itself. Clauses she'd ignored came back like ghosts. Legacy protections Daniel had written in back when he was just helping with structure had triggered liquidation preferences she never fully understood. Until now. She walked out of the office, past the interns who pretended not to notice, past the conference room with her name still etched faintly on the frosted glass. She took the elevator down 12 floors without breathing. The networking lunch was already underway, a women in tech brunch at a mid-range hotel conference center, full of reclaimed confidence and artificially sunny optimism. She wore sunglasses indoors and didn't touch the food. An old colleague approached, Chelsea, from one of the early cohorts, smiled too wide, hugged too tight. Heard about the deal, Chelsea whispered. Tough year, still close with your real partner. She smirked. Celeste forced a brittle laugh. You know how it is, everything's strategic. Chelsea moved on, but the comment lingered like cigarette smoke. Your real partner. That phrase again, the one she'd weaponized, bragged about, immortalized on stage in front of sponsors, investors, and, most importantly, him. And now it was a punchline. The room began to blur. The fluorescent lights, the faux granite buffet trays, the clatter of cutlery, all background noise for the roaring in her chest. She checked her phone. No new notifications, no emails, no messages from Daniel. But that night, back in the Airbnb she was calling home, she opened a new message thread anyway. Just his name, nothing more. Still stored in her phone under D. She typed slowly, erased, typed again, finally hit send. I didn't mean it like that. She stared at the screen. No dots, no read receipt, no response. Not that night, not ever. She walked to the mirror. Her face looked older now, like time had stopped being generous. Her hair, her eyes, sharp but hollow. She used to command the room. Now she avoided its gaze. The next day, another article appeared, not about her, about him. Evermere's silent strategist, how Daniel Noring redefined quiet power in tech restructuring. It was a profile piece, no quotes from him, just speculation, secondhand praise, and glowing respect. A whisper campaign in reverse. He hadn't just erased himself from her narrative. He'd built a new one where she couldn't follow. And now, she was the cautionary tale, the woman who mistook silence for passivity, whose empire crumbled while she posed in the spotlight, whose partner didn't yell. He just rewrote the ending and closed the book. The ballroom was familiar, but different this time. Sleeker, sharper, sterilized of sentiment. The chairs were new, the lighting tighter, the guest list trimmed. This was no charity gala with applause handed out like hors d'oeuvres. This was where winners were dissected like case studies. Quietly, clinically. Daniel sat near the stage. Front row. No one asked him to move this time. His seat bore a nameplate. His name, not hers. Not +1. The air around him had changed. Executives leaned in to greet him with quiet respect, not performative enthusiasm. A nod here, a handshake there, and always that look, the one people gave when they knew you could kill a deal with a whisper, because he could now. He didn't sip the champagne, just watched the stage as the host cleared her throat, a poised woman in minimalist black. And now, she said, we honor a firm that's become a benchmark for precision, discretion, and ethical leadership during some of the most complex transitions in tech over the past year. There was a subtle ripple in the room. Everyone knew who she meant. Evermere Strategies, she announced, has redefined what it means to lead from the shadows, structuring outcomes that speak louder than press releases. Applause, polite, measured, but undeniably present. Daniel stood. He walked to the stage like he walked through most situations, quietly, without theatrics. He took the glass award, minimalist, weighty, shaped like a shard of light. The host offered a microphone. He didn't hesitate. I won't take much of your time, he began, voice calm, steady. We're honored by this. He paused, no cards, no slides, just eyes. We believe in partnerships, the kind that don't need cameras, or podiums, or hashtags. Some in the crowd chuckled softly. A few shifted, suddenly remembering past speeches, past declarations, past taglines that now felt embarrassing in retrospect. He continued, real partnership isn't noise, it's structure. It's the wiring behind the walls. You don't notice it until it fails, or until someone replaces it. He held the award up slightly. To the builders in the background, this is for you. Applause again. Stronger this time, not just polite. As he stepped down, he allowed himself a single glance toward the back of the room. She was there, Celeste. Not seated, not greeted, just standing. Alone. Her dress was perfect. Her posture too. But everything about her screamed absence. She had become a ghost in the very room that used to orbit her name. No one approached her. No one offered a drink. She didn't hold a phone. No publicist hovered nearby. It was unclear if she'd been invited or had just appeared, trying to still belong. He didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't smirk. He just walked past her like she was one more wall sconce, familiar, decorative, irrelevant. She watched him return to his seat, watched the subtle tilt of heads leaning his way, watched the murmurs ripple outward from his presence, not hers. Her mouth trembled slightly, and in that trembling she understood. It hadn't been luck, it hadn't been timing, it had been him all along, and not the man who held her hand at galas or paid her legal bills or smiled from row 3, the other version, the one who saw the entire board long before she even knew it was a game. He hadn't won because he fought, he won because he waited, because his silence wasn't a retreat, it was strategy, and by the time she heard it, it was too late to speak.